My name is Sarah Mitchell, 34 years old, a graphic designer who built her brand from absolute scratch in Austin, Texas. It was a Thursday night when my phone buzzed with a text from Mom that made everything stop. "Don't call us or visit. We're finished with you." My chest tightened, but I didn't cry or panic. I typed back 3 words. "Understood. Take care." That was it. 8 years of draining my bank accounts for my family, paying Mom's heart surgery bills, covering my younger brother Tyler's failed business ventures, keeping their struggling antique furniture store from closing, wiped away in 14 words. I'd always been the outsider, the daughter who chose design software over family tradition, the one they never quite accepted. But that text was different. It was final, and I wasn't going to chase them anymore. By midnight, my phone was exploding. Missed calls, frantic voicemails, texts piling up like a digital avalanche. Mom's number appeared again and again. Then Tyler's, even Dad's rarely used cell. They were spiraling, and I knew exactly why. I'd been their personal ATM for nearly a decade, and now the machine was permanently out of service. What happened after that completely destroyed everything I thought I understood about my family. Stick with me to hear how it all fell apart. If you've ever been the family scapegoat while your sibling could do no wrong, smash that like button, drop your story in the comments, and subscribe because this ride gets intense. Growing up in Austin, our family looked like something from a Southern Living magazine. My father owned Mitchell & Sons Antique Furniture, a business his grandfather started in 1952. The shop occupied a prime spot on South Congress Avenue, filled with restored Victorian chairs and mid-century modern tables. Mom had been a promising accountant before marriage, but she gave it all up to support Dad's vision, managing the books and hosting elaborate Sunday dinners. My brother Tyler, 5 years younger than me, was the miracle child, the boy who would carry the Mitchell name into the future, expanding the business across Texas. And then there was me, Sarah Mitchell, the family disappointment, obsessed with Adobe Creative Suite instead of antique appraisals. From age 12, Dad's expectations were set in stone. "This business is your inheritance," he'd say every chance he got, standing in the showroom surrounded by furniture worth thousands of dollars. "You'll learn restoration, Sarah, pricing, client relations, everything." But I felt nothing when I looked at those antiques. My passion burned for something completely different: graphic design, creating brand identities for startups, designing websites that told stories, crafting visual campaigns that made people stop scrolling. By high school, I was staying up until 2 a.m. designing mock advertisements and logo concepts, dreaming of agencies and creative studios. When I told Dad at 17 that I wanted to study graphic design at the Savannah College of Art and Design, he actually laughed in my face. "That's not a real career, Sarah," he said, his voice dripping with dismissal. "That's something you do as a hobby on weekends. The furniture business is real work." Mom stood behind him in the kitchen doorway, nodding along, her silence screaming agreement. Tyler, barely 13, smirked from the living room couch like he'd already won some unspoken competition. I felt like a stranger in my own home, their obvious favoritism toward him creating a canyon between us. Dad's ultimatum came swift and brutal. "If you're not joining the family business, you're completely on your own," he stated, arms crossed tight across his chest. "No tuition money, no living expenses, nothing." Mom didn't even try to soften the blow. "Your father's right, sweetheart," she said, using that condescending tone I'd grown to hate. "We need to invest in the business, and Tyler will need support when he takes over." I was 18, freshly accepted to my dream school, and completely abandoned by the people who were supposed to support me unconditionally. I worked 3 jobs simultaneously: waitressing at a barbecue joint on 6th Street, tutoring rich kids in art, and doing freelance logo designs on Fiverr for $5 each. Late nights blurred into early mornings, endless shifts, ramen noodles for dinner, and a crushing mountain of student loans became my reality. Dad never once asked how I was surviving, never showed even mild curiosity about my struggles. Mom's occasional "I think about you" texts felt completely empty, especially when she'd immediately follow up with paragraphs gushing about Tyler's mediocre attempts at learning the furniture business. He could literally do nothing wrong, even when he damaged expensive inventory or insulted valuable customers. Meanwhile, I missed one Thanksgiving because of a major client presentation, and I got a guilt trip lecture that lasted 45 minutes. I'll never forget Christmas 2019 when I came home for the holidays. Tyler had forgotten to lock the store one night after close, and burglars made off with nearly $30,000 worth of merchandise. Dad's response? "He's still learning the ropes," he said with a casual shrug, pouring himself bourbon. "These things happen in business." But that same weekend, I mentioned possibly missing Easter because of a design conference in New York, and Dad exploded. "Family comes first, Sarah. When are you going to get your priorities straight?" The double standard was suffocating, but I kept swallowing it down, thinking eventually they'd recognize my worth. The distance between us grew like a living thing. Dad's attention laser-focused on Tyler constantly, the son who would inherit the empire, despite showing minimal interest or talent. Mom followed Dad's lead religiously, her warmth and pride reserved exclusively for my brother. I tried desperately to maintain closeness with her, calling every Sunday morning, sending her screenshots of my design work featured in publications, sharing my victories. But her responses were always distracted, rushed. "That's wonderful, honey, but I need to go. Tyler's presenting his expansion ideas to your father." And she'd hang up before I could finish my sentence. By the time I graduated with honors at 23, the rift felt permanent. I'd built an impressive reputation in Austin's design scene, designing for tech startups and established brands, landing features in design blogs and local magazines. But at family gatherings twice a year, the conversation always centered on the furniture store. "When are you going to stop playing around and join the real family business?" Dad would ask, like my thriving career was an elaborate joke. Tyler would pile on, making snarky comments about my computer doodling, and Mom would smile approvingly, never once defending me or acknowledging my achievements. Their favoritism wasn't subtle. It was a brick wall, and I was permanently on the wrong side. Looking back now, those formative years laid the foundation for everything that followed. I kept trying to prove myself, to earn just a small space in their world, to make them see me as valuable. But the harder I worked, the more money I made, the clearer the truth became. They'd chosen Tyler as their future, and I was just the backup daughter they didn't actually want around.
After design school, I poured everything into building my graphic design career. Savannah had taught me to think strategically, creating brand identities that told compelling stories, not just pretty pictures. Back in Austin, I started small, rebranding local coffee shops and designing websites for mom-and-pop restaurants. My first major breakthrough came at 26, when a tech startup hired me to design their entire visual identity: logo, website, app interface, marketing materials. Clean aesthetics, bold typography, and strategic color psychology, my work started getting noticed. Soon, established companies were reaching out, and my name, Sarah Mitchell Design, began appearing in Austin Monthly and Texas Design showcases. By age 30, I was signing contracts worth $70,000 to $80,000, building a solid reputation as Austin's go-to designer for tech companies and upscale brands. My portfolio was impressive, my client list was growing, and I'd finally proven that my computer doodling was worth something. But at home, that was a completely different nightmare. 6 years ago, Mom had a massive heart attack. The doctors were brutally honest. She needed emergency triple bypass surgery, and the recovery would require months of expensive cardiac rehabilitation. Dad's furniture store was struggling badly, barely breaking even most months, and their health insurance had massive deductibles. I didn't even hesitate. I immediately wired $15,000 for the surgery, then another $8,000 for the rehab facility. "We'll definitely pay you back," Dad promised over the phone, his voice stiff and businesslike. but I knew better than to actually expect repayment. Mom sent a single text, "Thank you, Sarah. You're a good daughter." That was literally it. No phone call, no real gratitude, no acknowledgement of the sacrifice. It hurt, but I convinced myself I was doing it for her health, not their approval. Then came Tyler's disasters. My brother, barely 25, had started a furniture flipping business, buying cheap pieces at estate sales, doing quick paint jobs, and reselling them online. It crashed and burned within 8 months. He'd racked up enormous debts, maxed out 3 credit cards, and couldn't cover his portion of the family store's operating costs. Dad called me one Tuesday evening, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. "Tyler needs help, Sarah. Family helps family." I transferred $35,000 to clear his credit card debts and another $25,000 to cover his share of store expenses. Tyler never said thank you. Not once. Instead, at a 4th of July barbecue, he bragged loudly to relatives about how he turned his business around through hard work and determination, as if my $60,000 hadn't saved his ass. Dad beamed with pride, clapping Tyler on the shoulder, while I stood there holding a beer completely invisible. I kept giving and giving. When the furniture store needed a new delivery truck because the old one died, I covered $12,000. When Mom's follow-up cardiac care required a specialist in Houston, I paid for the travel, consultations, and medications, another $9,000. Each time I hoped they'd finally see me as more than just a checkbook. But at family dinners, the conversation always revolved around the store. Tyler's half-baked expansion plans, Dad's nostalgia about the good old days, Mom's pride in how hard the men were working. My design work? Barely mentioned. Once I excitedly shared a magazine feature about my rebrand of a major Austin restaurant chain, thinking Mom might actually be proud. She glanced at the article for maybe 5 seconds and said, "That's nice, sweetie, but Tyler's working 16-hour days at the store. He's so dedicated." I forced a smile, my chest aching with disappointment. The pattern became suffocating. I'd call Mom to check in, craving actual connection, but she'd immediately pivot to Tyler's latest idea or Dad's stress about competition from online furniture retailers. Dad never asked about my projects, only calling when they needed money. "The store's short on rent this month," he'd say flatly, and I'd log into my bank account and transfer $4,000, feeling more like an ATM than a daughter. Tyler, meanwhile, acted completely entitled, like my success existed solely to support him. "You're doing really well financially, so why wouldn't you help out?" he said once, casual and matter-of-fact, like my decade of grinding meant absolutely nothing. The financial bleeding was relentless. Over 6 years, I calculated I'd given them close to $270,000. I'd paid for medical emergencies, covered business shortfalls, bailed out Tyler repeatedly, and received nothing in return except occasional acknowledgement that I existed. Not respect, not appreciation, not even basic gratitude. Just expectations for more. The emotional toll was even worse. Every check I wrote felt like another attempt to buy their love, to bridge the gap they'd built between us. But they took everything I offered and gave nothing back. At 32, I was financially successful, but emotionally bankrupt from trying to earn my family's approval. The hurt accumulated silently. Every dismissed conversation, every time they prioritized Tyler, every family photo they posted on Facebook that somehow didn't include me. Then came my business pitch. I'd been developing an ambitious plan for months, launching a design agency specifically focused on sustainable branding for eco-conscious companies. It wasn't just passion, it was solid business strategy. Market research showed massive demand for green branding in Austin's environmentally aware business community. I needed capital to hire designers, rent office space, and market the agency. For the first time in years, I thought maybe my family would see my vision as legitimate. I put together a professional presentation, detailed financial projections, market analysis, client testimonials, and growth strategy. I invited them to meet at a restaurant in downtown Austin, hoping neutral territory might help. I set up my laptop, slides ready, my stomach churning with nervous hope. Dad sat across from me, arms crossed, face unreadable. Mom fidgeted into her water glass, avoiding eye contact. Tyler slouched in his chair, scrolling through Instagram, barely pretending to pay attention. His wife, Emma Mitchell, sat quietly beside him, offering me a small, sympathetic smile. I began explaining the concept, how sustainable branding was the future, how companies would pay premium rates for eco-friendly design services, how this could establish Austin as a leader in green creative industries. I'm requesting $150,000 in investment. I'll repay it with interest within 3 years based on these conservative projections. Dad didn't let me finish. Sounds like wishful thinking, he interrupted, leaning back in his chair. You think companies actually care about recycled paper and plant-based inks? They want cheap and fast, not expensive experiments. His words felt like a slap across my face, but I pushed forward, showing him data on client demand and industry growth. Tyler snorted without even looking up from his phone. Seems like a waste of money to me, he said dismissively. Why don't you just stick to making websites and logos? I clenched my fists under the table, my face burning with humiliation. I'd spent 4 months developing this plan, and they were dismissing it without even looking at the data. Mom stayed completely silent, rearranging her napkin, doing her usual avoidance routine. I turned to her desperately. Mom, you've seen my work succeed. You know I can build this. She hesitated, then mumbled, It sounds risky, honey. The furniture store is what we understand. Safe investments. Her words stung worse than Dad's outright rejection. I'd paid for her life-saving surgery, kept their failing business afloat for years, and I was still the unreliable outsider. Emma spoke up suddenly, her voice soft but clear. I actually think it's really innovative, she said, glancing nervously at Tyler. For one brief moment, hope flickered in my chest, but Tyler shot her a sharp look, and she immediately went quiet, shrinking back into her seat. Dad waved his hand dismissively, cutting off any further discussion. We're not throwing money at this, he declared. Tyler's planning to open a second store location in Round Rock. That's our investment priority. Tyler smirked at me like he'd won a competition I hadn't known we were having. I tried one final time, my voice rising with frustration. This isn't a handout, it's a business investment with actual returns. I've built my entire career from nothing. You know I deliver results. Dad shook his head firmly. You chose to leave the family business, Sarah. That has consequences. Tyler added with a condescending tone, maybe if you had actually helped at the store instead of doing your own thing, we'd take you seriously. I wanted to scream. I'd given them nearly $300,000, bailed them out countless times, and they still saw me as the kid with unrealistic dreams. The restaurant felt smaller, the air thick with their complete dismissal of everything I'd accomplished. I closed my laptop, my hands shaking with suppressed rage and hurt. Emma caught my eye as I stood to leave, mouthing, I'm sorry, but it didn't help. Driving home, I replayed their words on a loop, each sentence a reminder that I would never be enough for them. Dad's focus would always be on Tyler, Tyler the golden son, Tyler the heir, Tyler who could do no wrong despite his failures. Mom's silence was equally damaging, her loyalty permanently tied to Dad's vision. Even Emma, who'd briefly seen potential in my idea, couldn't stand up to them. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my detailed business plan. I'd poured everything into it, just like I'd poured everything into my family. But their rejection wasn't about the business. It was about me, about never believing in me, never respecting me. I didn't realize it then, but that meeting was the beginning of the end.
2 weeks after that disastrous pitch meeting, everything exploded in a way I never saw coming. I'd been invited to Dad's birthday dinner at their house in Terrytown, a tense affair I almost skipped. The evening was awkward as usual, with Tyler dominating conversation about his plans for the second furniture store location, Dad nodding approvingly at every half-baked idea. After dinner, while everyone was in the living room, I went to the kitchen to grab my purse, ready to escape. Emma followed me in, glancing nervously over her shoulder. She pulled me aside near the pantry, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah, I need to tell you something," she said, her hands trembling slightly. "Tyler's been stealing from the store for years." My stomach dropped. I stared at her, processing the words. "What are you talking about?" I whispered back. She looked terrified, like she was betraying her own husband, which technically she was. He's been skimming cash from daily sales, creating fake vendor invoices and pocketing the difference. I found documentation, spreadsheets he tried to hide, bank statements showing transfers to a secret account. It's why the store keeps struggling financially. He's taken at least $80,000 over the past 4 years. I stood frozen, my mind racing. The constant cash shortages, the emergency calls for money, the vendor payment issues I'd covered, it all made horrible sense now. "Does anyone else know?" I asked. Emma shook her head quickly. "I don't think so. Your parents just blamed the economy and online competition. Tyler's good at covering his tracks." Before I could respond, I heard voices rising in the dining room. I crept closer, staying hidden behind the doorway connecting to the hallway. Dad's voice carried clearly, talking to Mom in that authoritative tone he used for important decisions. "We need to finalize the will update this month," he said firmly. "Tyler's the one keeping this family legacy alive. Sarah off building her own life. She doesn't care about what we've built here." My heart started pounding so hard I thought they might hear it. Mom murmured something I couldn't make out, then said softly, "She's been very generous financially, Stephen. We should acknowledge that." Dad cut her off sharply. "Money isn't loyalty. Tyler's committed to the family business, to continuing what my grandfather started. We're leaving the store and the house to him. Sarah made her choice when she left." The room tilted. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. After everything, all the money, all the sacrifices, all the years of trying to prove my worth, they were erasing me from their future, cutting me out of the will completely, rewarding Tyler for his loyalty while he'd been stealing from them the entire time. The irony was so bitter I almost laughed out loud. I slipped out the back door without saying goodbye, my mind spinning with Emma's confession and Dad's words. I sat in my car for 20 minutes in their driveway, trying to process the double betrayal. Tyler's theft explained everything: the constant financial crises, the desperate calls for help, the money that never seemed to fix their problems, and they were rewarding him for it while dismissing me as disloyal. The injustice burned in my chest like acid. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 9 a.m. A text from Mom. "Don't call or visit. We're finished with you." I stared at the screen, reading it 3 times to make sure I understood correctly. My hands started shaking. This wasn't about the will. I hadn't confronted them about what I'd overheard. This was something else, something more personal. Mom, the parent I'd always been closest to, the one I thought understood me even a little, was cutting me off completely. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to call immediately, to demand an explanation, to fight back. But a stronger part, the part that was exhausted from years of being undervalued, typed 3 words. "Understood. Take care." I hit send before I could overthink it. No more chasing. No more begging for scraps. If they wanted me gone, I'd give them exactly what they wanted. I opened my banking app with shaking hands. For the past 6 years, I'd set up recurring payments for various family expenses. Mom's cardiac medication, a monthly automatic payment of $450. Tyler's debt payments, $600 monthly to 3 different credit cards. The furniture store's business insurance, $820 quarterly. One by one, I canceled every recurring transaction. Each cancellation confirmation felt like cutting a rope that had been strangling me for years. Then I went further. I called Mom's prescription plan and removed myself as the guarantor. I contacted Tyler's credit card companies and removed my bank account as backup payment. I called the furniture store's insurance company and took my credit card off file. I was systematically removing myself from their financial life, erasing every safety net I'd built for them over the years. The process took 2 hours. When I finished, I'd eliminated close to $300,000 in past payments and thousands in monthly ongoing support. I sat on my couch afterwards, staring at the confirmation emails filling my inbox. Cancellation confirmed, payment method removed, automatic transfer stopped. Each one represented a piece of myself I was reclaiming. The relief was immediate but complicated. I wasn't just cutting off money, I was releasing the hope that they'd ever truly see me, appreciate me, love me the way I deserved. Emma's revelation about Tyler's theft kept echoing in my mind. Years of theft covered up while I'd been pouring money into fixing problems he'd created. And they were rewarding him, choosing him, writing me out of their future. The betrayal was layered. financial, emotional, familial. That night, I couldn't sleep. Mom's text, "We're finished with you," kept replaying in my head. It wasn't just a message, it was a declaration of war I hadn't started. They'd made their choice, drawn their line, and I wasn't on their side of it. But something had shifted in me. I wasn't the same Sarah who desperately sought their approval for years. I'd built a successful business without their support, created a life I was proud of, proven my worth to everyone except them. And suddenly, their opinion didn't matter anymore. I thought about calling Emma back, asking for more details about Tyler's theft, maybe even exposing him to our parents. But what would that accomplish? They'd probably defend him, make excuses, blame the stress of the business. The golden child could do no wrong in their eyes, even when caught red-handed. Besides, Emma had risked enough telling me. I wasn't going to drag her deeper into this mess. By sunrise Friday morning, I felt different, lighter somehow, despite the hurt. Their betrayal had lit something in me, but instead of burning me down, it was forging me into someone stronger, someone who wouldn't accept being treated as less than, someone who knew her worth, even if her own family didn't.
By Friday afternoon, my phone had become a war zone. Missed calls in double digits, voicemails filling up my inbox, text messages coming in rapid-fire bursts. Mom's number appeared most frequently, then Tyler's, then even Dad's number that usually sat dormant for months at a time. They'd obviously discovered the canceled payments, and the panic was setting in fast. I didn't answer a single call. I sat in my home office, watching my phone light up repeatedly, each buzz sending a small jolt through my chest. After years of being their emergency contact and personal bank, I'd pulled the plug, and they were completely unraveling. Part of me felt guilty, the part that had been conditioned since childhood to prioritize their needs. But a stronger part felt vindicated, even powerful. Tyler's first voicemail was pure venom. "You've got to be kidding me, Sarah," he snarled into the phone. "You're seriously cutting us off like this after everything we've done for you? You're being incredibly selfish." Selfish? The word almost made me laugh out loud. I'd paid off his massive debts, covered his portion of business expenses, and funded his lifestyle for years while he stole from our parents. And I was selfish? His second message came an hour later, more threatening this time. "You need to fix this immediately, Sarah. We'll take legal action if necessary. You can't just abandon your family obligations." Legal action for what, exactly? For stopping voluntary payments to ungrateful relatives? I saved that voicemail, not out of fear, but as evidence of who they really were. Mom's texts came next, arriving in a flood of manipulation disguised as maternal concern. "How could you do this to us, Sarah? After everything I've been through with my health, you're abandoning your own mother." Another one read, "I raised you better than this. Family doesn't turn their backs on family." The guilt trip was expertly crafted. She'd always known exactly which emotional buttons to push. She referenced late-night talks from my childhood, times she'd helped me with school projects, moments I'd treasured. But now those memories felt weaponized, tools to control me rather than genuine connection. I didn't respond to any of them. Each message was another attempt to pull me back into their dysfunction, and I refused to give them that power anymore. Dad's call came at midnight. I let it go to voicemail, listening afterward to his authoritative voice booming through the speaker. "Sarah, you need to restore those payments immediately," he commanded, as if I were an employee who'd made an accounting error. "The store can't operate without that insurance coverage, and your mother needs her medications. You owe us that much after we raised you." Owed them? For 18 years of making me feel inadequate? For dismissing my career? For cutting me out of their will while I funded their lives? I saved that voicemail too. Saturday morning brought more of the same. Tyler sent a text, "You're destroying this family. Mom's crying, Dad's stressed, and it's all your fault. This is on you." I could picture him pacing around his house, blaming everyone but himself for the situation he largely created through his theft. Emma called once but didn't leave a message. I wondered how much she'd told Tyler about our conversation, whether she was caught in the middle now, regretting that she'd spoken up. Mom's next voicemail was softer, more pleading. "Sarah, please, sweetheart," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "We're family. You can't just turn your back on us like this. I don't understand what happened. Please call me back."
I wanted to believe her distress was genuine, but her text from Thursday, "We're finished with you," still burned in my memory. You can't declare someone dead to you and then demand they resurrect themselves when convenient. Dad's called again Saturday afternoon. Against my better judgment, I answered, thinking maybe, just maybe, he'd acknowledge their mistakes, apologize, try to make things right. Instead, he launched immediately into accusations. "You're putting your mother's health at serious risk," he said, his voice hard. "Her cardiac medications aren't cheap, and the store's barely surviving. You need to restore those payments and grow up." Not a single word about the will, about Tyler's theft that Emma had revealed, about years of favoritism, just demands and blame. I kept my voice calm but ice cold. "I've supported this family financially for 8 years, Dad. I'm done now." He paused, clearly not expecting resistance. "You'll regret this when you see what happens to us," he said, echoing Tyler's earlier threat. I hung up without responding, my hands steady, my resolve hardening like concrete. The barrage continued through the weekend. Brandon threatened to tell everyone about my betrayal, though I wasn't sure what story he planned to spin. Mom sent another text invoking my childhood. "Remember when I stayed up all night helping you finish that art project in 8th grade? I've always been there for you when it mattered." But she hadn't been there when I needed her, to stand up for me, to defend my dreams, to see me as equal to Tyler. Being there when convenient wasn't the same as unconditional support. By Monday, I'd received 47 calls, 32 voicemails, and 86 text messages. Each one was desperate, angry, pleading, manipulative, threatening. They tried every tactic: guilt, fear, obligation, love bombing, intimidation. But I saw through it all now. They didn't want me. They wanted my money. They didn't miss their daughter. They missed their ATM. I checked my bank account, looking at the balance that had been steadily depleting for years. Without their constant drain, I was financially stable again, even comfortable. No more emergency transfers at 11 p.m., no more juggling my own bills to cover theirs, no more sacrificing my future for people who didn't value me. I stayed silent through it all, not responding to a single message. Each day that passed, their panic grew more obvious, their messages more desperate. But I didn't waver. This wasn't revenge. It was survival. It was choosing myself for the first time in my adult life. 2 weeks later, I agreed to meet them one final time, not to reconcile, but to close this chapter permanently. I suggested a coffee shop in downtown Austin, neutral territory, where I could leave whenever I wanted. I arrived early, ordered a black coffee, and sat facing the door. When they walked in, the tension was visible from across the room. Dad's face was tight with anger. Mom looked exhausted, her eyes red. Tyler followed behind them, his expression oscillating between hostile and smug. Emma wasn't there. She'd texted me earlier saying she couldn't face the confrontation. I didn't wait for them to start. I sold my sustainable design agency Concept. A national branding firm bought it for $850,000. I built that from nothing, without any help from you, despite your doubts and dismissals. Dad's jaw clenched. Mom looked down at her hands. Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I leaned forward. "I gave you everything. Money, time, trust, loyalty, and you threw it away. You chose Tyler over me repeatedly, even after he stole from you." I didn't mention Emma's name, protecting her secret. Tyler's face turned red. "That's a lie. You're making things up to justify abandoning us." I didn't blink. "The bank records don't lie, Tyler. The fake vendor invoices don't lie." Mom's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes darting to Tyler with dawning horror. Dad's face remained hard, but I saw the flicker of uncertainty. "You don't get to judge us," Dad said, his voice sharp with defensiveness. "You walked away from this family years ago when you refused to join the business." I actually laughed, a bitter, exhausted sound. "I walked away? Dad? You pushed me out. You cut me from your will, called me disloyal, dismissed everything I built. Mom texted me that you were finished with me." Mom tried her usual approach, her voice soft and pleading. "Sarah, we're your family. You can't turn your back on us like this. I don't understand what happened." I met her eyes directly, unflinching. "You turned your back first, Mom. That text was your choice, not mine. Tyler scoffed. "You think you're better than us now? You'll come crawling back eventually. You always do." I shook my head slowly. "No, Tyler, I really won't." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "This is it. No more money, no more emergency calls, no more chances. I deserve respect and appreciation, not manipulation. Since you can't provide that, we're finished." Dad's face hardened further. "You're making a huge mistake, Sarah," he said, his voice carrying that familiar threatening tone. "You'll regret this." I didn't respond. I walked out of the coffee shop, the glass door closing behind me with finality. My heart felt heavy, but free, like I'd been carrying a backpack full of rocks for years and finally set it down. I didn't look back through the window. I got in my car and drove away from that chapter of my life forever. 1 year later, I heard about the aftermath through mutual friends and some distant relatives who'd stayed neutral. The furniture store filed for bankruptcy 9 months after I cut them off, unable to survive without my financial cushion. Tyler's theft eventually came to light when vendors started demanding payment and lawyers got involved in the bankruptcy proceedings. He faced legal consequences, lawsuits, possible fraud charges, his reputation in Austin's business community destroyed. Mom and Dad retreated into isolation, their legacy crumbling, their retirement plans evaporated. The house in Terrytown went up for sale to cover debts. Tyler and Emma divorced. She'd had enough of his lies and manipulation. She reached out to me once, apologizing for not speaking up sooner, but I didn't pursue the friendship. That whole world was behind me now. I moved forward with intention and purpose. The sale of my agency concept gave me the freedom to expand my design business properly, hiring a small team of talented designers, taking on national clients, even doing some work for eco-friendly brands in California and New York. My life wasn't perfect. I still had moments of grief over the family I'd lost, or maybe the family I'd never really had. But it was mine, built on my terms, reflecting my values.
I found peace in those boundaries I'd set, in choosing myself over toxic obligation. The pain of their betrayal faded gradually, like a bruise healing. It no longer defined who I was or determined my worth.